This is Professor Mike Ventola from Sandhills Community College, bringing you Grass of the Week. Welcome to week 15 of Grass of the Week. Our second to last grass is going to be a novelty grass, something you really won't see grown much here in North Carolina, as will be explained by Dr. Dan Bowman, who's a professor at NC State University, who we're going to be interviewing at the end of this video cast. But Buchloe, dactyloides, Buffalograss, a very important historic grass for people that live in the United States. Buffalograss is unique in the fact that it's the only native grass to the U.S. Also, it's unique in the fact that it's dioecious. It has two houses. It has the female plant, which is shown here, represented by the big seed that comes off it, and then a male plant, which is represented by the pollen. And Dan Bowman is going to talk quite a bit about the pollen from the male plant and how you would use this grass. We actually wouldn't like the pollen because it's one of the most allergenic pollens in the grass world. This grass is, I like to say, why the United States is so great. It formed the Great Prairies of Kansas, Wisconsin, Oklahoma. This grass was so tight the trees couldn't grow in those prairies. It deposited so much organic matter that we're still reaping the benefit from that in corn yields and crop yields and things like that. It has a rolled vernation, which I'm going to talk about when we go through it. Interestingly, the NC State book does key out for Buffalograss on page 13. However, it's not a grass that would grow here, but it is a grass that there were some attempts to grow here. This is probably one of the hairiest of the warm season grasses. It has both male and female parts, and the flowers can be undesirable. But here's why I think it's so interesting, and this is my little story. If there's any Oklahoma Sooner fans out there, or anybody whose relatives went out west and lived in a grass house, your family probably lived in a house made out of buffalo grass, and here's an example of one of those early houses. And the reason I say Oklahoma Sooners is because pretty good football team sometimes, but the school's named after something that's kind of actually named after some cheaters. When we had the rush of the West, when the government decided to give land away, they picked a day and all the settlers they shot a shotgun, and the settlers rode off on horseback with a stick that had their initials on it, or their name, or their mark, and they staked their claim, as we call it, and they claimed certain land, so they went out there and put that. Well, it turns out that there were people that snuck out the night before the gun went off and hid in the bushes or hid wherever, and then popped up and put down their stakes. These people were called Sooners, and they were the people that got out there sooner than the other people, and they got the best land. So I think it's interesting that a college is, with as much pride as that university was named really after a bunch of cheaters who went out and won the West, as it were. We're buffer. The government wanted to give away this land so settlers would move out there. People that didn't have land on the East Coast, and they would take the land so that the Spanish or the French or the Indians wouldn't take those. So rough lifestyle, not the cleanest environment in the world, but an adequate house, and a lot of the strength of our country was built on those early settlers who went out there and raised corn and now soybeans and the great crops of the West. So if you go through on page 13, the vernation is going to be rolled. The ligule is a fringe of hairs. There is no auricle. It's a stoloniferous growth habit. I'm going to show you some pictures from NC State on that in a minute. The sheath is open and round. The collar is continuous, broad, and hairy. and the blade is sharp pointed, about 3 millimeters wide. So we probably won't see this in your classes if you're going to school here in North Carolina, but it is a grass that you can identify, and it does have golf course uses out west, particularly in low irrigation areas. This is a very, very drought tolerant area, so the rough in prairie out west, this is probably a good selection. And again, the main feature is it's a seed head. It's dioecious. It has both male and female parts. So here we go. Here is some buffalo grass. You can see it's an open canopy. It's not the best looking grass in the world, but right here where my finger is pointing, that is the female part. So that will be a seed, and that's what the seeds look like. So this is one of the easiest grasses to identify the seed of. The seed looks almost like a sand spur, but even larger. You can see from this picture from turf files, you can see pretty long stolons, quite hairy. You can see pretty long hairs coming off the bottom of the leaf, and quite open. So it's not producing a tight knit grass like we're used to, but this is expected because it's a grass that does survive under very low moisture conditions. In a low moisture prairie condition, is not going to have a really tight grass, but it does have a deep grass, and it does put organic matter in. So again, we are producing, we are building nitrogen into the system. So over millions of years, it makes for good soil, but it doesn't make for great turf grass now. Close-up look of the ligule, you can see the hairs on that. That's a great example of a hairy ligule. So these are some plots that were grown in Roseville. They're no longer there. Turns out this grass does not do well in this environment, and you can see that even if it did well, this is about as good as it's going to look, and that's not really acceptable for a lot of what we're looking for now. It might be in the future, so it's something to keep an eye on, but it's not a grass I would recommend use for the southeast transition zone. Again, looking at some more improved cultivars, these look pretty good, but they just did not survive the moisture in this area. They basically got overwatered, and you can see that weed infestations became a big problem, and Dr. Fraser was not able to really produce anything that she felt was adequate from these plots in North Carolina. So we'll end that as a quick one. Let's take a time now and listen to Dr. Dan Bowman.
Yes, this is Dr. Dan Bowman at NC State. I'm talking to Mike Bento, who was at one time one of my students, and he's gone on to great success since he's here.
Great to talk to you, Dan. What we're talking about today, our grass of the week, is Buffalograss, and I'd like for you to talk about how you identify the grass.
Well, first off, I'll tell you, it's hard to identify where we live in North Carolina because it simply won't grow here. So if you are tasked with the chore of identifying buffalograss, it probably means you're out west somewhere. Buffalograss is a fairly easy grass to identify. It's of course a warm season grass, and you would expect then that it would be dormant during the cooler times of the year. You probably can narrow it down to one of the warm seasons. Buffalograss has a fairly unique color among the warm season species. It tends to be either somewhat olive green in color or kind of an olive grayish green in color. Partly this is due to the natural color of the pigments in the leaf, and partly it's due to the presence in many of the varieties of an awful lot of hairs on the leaf. Buffalograss is probably one of the hairiest of the grasses that we would ever have. And in fact, when you can get a leaf and look at it, it almost looks fuzzy. Now, having said that, I will say that breeders and people often find that hairy look to a grass kind of off-putting. It's not a terribly attractive feature. And so breeders have, in some of the newer varieties, gotten the number of hairs down to very few, and in some cases almost nothing. So hairs used to be a really good characteristic on buffalograss, but it's less so today. Now, buffalograss is primarily stoloniferous grass. It will develop a lot of stones, very aggressive stolons. But probably in the field, if you were looking especially at seeded buffalo grasses, one of the easiest characteristics is the female flower structure, which is located down within the pea. Buffalo grasses have a very unique spur seed structure, which develops from a very robust, almost hard, crusty female inflorescence down within the canopy itself. And there's no other grass that has anything like it. So if you're on your hands and knees and you see some of these kind of scaly, yellowish-looking flower structures down in the canopy, you're looking at buffalo grass.
Yeah, I know now Melody Frazier had grown a little bit that we were able to see, and the canopy on it is very open. Does it get any denser out west where you've worked with it?
Yeah, the reason that it would be fairly open here is that it grows very poorly here. You can have densities out west comparable to a ryegrass in some cases. It does get a lot denser where it's well adapted. It's prone to diseases. It doesn't like our soils. It doesn't like our humidity. It doesn't like our water. It doesn't like our diseases here. And so, if you're looking at buffalo grass here, you're looking at junk compared to where it's well adapted.
Now, where would a place where you would recommend using buffalo grass be, Dan?
Geographically or climatically?
Both.
Well, it's native to the Great Plains of North America. Its range extends from approximately Missouri on the eastern end all the way into the Great Basin, the eastern edge of the Great Basin. If it's maintained as a turf grass, you can grow it, from probably close to the Mississippi, extending west all the way into California. It does best in arid climates. It doesn't like high humidity. It doesn't like wet soils, and so any place that you've got relatively dry soils, it will do well. It does quite well with fairly cold winters. In fact, buffalo grass, the range of buffalo grass is from central Mexico, where it evolved, all the way up through North America into the Canadian Great Plains. And so, it tolerates extremes of cold relative to any other warm-season species. So any place that you have relatively dry, arid conditions, it will grow well. It prefers alkaline soils to acidic soils, as we have in the southeast. It prefers heavier clay soils to sandy soils. And so, much of the western half of the United States would be reasonably well suited for buffalo grass.
Seems like you couldn't design a worse place than North Carolina for it to grow.
Well, when I came here, I discovered that. I thought that, 13, 14 years ago when I came here, I could introduce a new species and maybe figure out how best to grow it. And within about 2 years, I concluded that it was just simply not well enough adapted here to ever be a grass that I would want to try and grow.
Yeah. Now, do you have an interesting story from your work out west where you've seen buffalo grass be successful?
Sure, I've seen buffalo grass be successful, but let me first tell you where buffalo grass has been unsuccessful out west. Buffalo grass is grown because it can tolerate very low irrigation. It's grown as probably the most drought-tolerant, lowest water-using grass that we have. And there was a push during the last drought in the mid-1980s up through the early 1990s to convert golf courses, and some golf courses at least, from Bermuda grass to buffalo grass because water savings could amount to maybe 40 to 50%. Unfortunately, people were used to growing Bermuda grass. They were used to managing Bermuda grass under golf course conditions. And they tried to grow buffalo grass with essentially the same level of management, same cultivation, same fertilization, same irrigation. And what they quickly found out was that buffalo grass doesn't like to be babied. It doesn't like to grow under that high a level of management. It's kind of counterintuitive that a grass wouldn't like additional resources, but it turns out buffalo grass doesn't. And there were failures because people were trying to grow it as Bermuda grass rather than take advantage of its natural adaptation. So I think a lesson was learned. You have to understand the grass ecology and the grass biology if you're going to try and grow something new.
Yeah, I guess something similar to trying to grow centipede fairways here in North Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, if you try and grow them with the same level of management as you would Bermuda grass, you're not going to have much luck. But as far as an interesting anecdote, one of the characteristics of buffalo grass is that, for some reason, the pollen from the male flowers of buffalo grass, and buffalo grass is kind of interesting in that it has both male and female plants. It's a botanical condition that we term dioecious. It means two houses. It means that the males live in one house and the females live in another house. Well, we got male and female plants. And so male buffalo grass plants produce the pollen. It turns out buffalo grass pollen is among the worst irritants for people who are allergic to grass pollen.
Oh, yeah.
And I am particularly allergic to grass pollen. Well, for the most part, grass pollen just give me the sniffles or red eyes. But buffalo grass is so severe that it would actually give me a rash if I got it on my skin. And when I was working with buffalo grass, I would have to have my technician go and mow the fields or mow the plants in the greenhouse before I could go into the field and work with the grass. I was so allergic to the pollen. But it turns out I'm not the only one. Very many people who have grass allergies are severely allergic to buffalo grass pollen, to the point where I've heard of people having to tear out their buffalo grass lawns because of some health issues in the family.
Wow, yeah.
Now there's a solution, a simple solution, and it has to do with the fact that the plant is dioecious.
Yeah, only female plants, right?
Only work with female plants. And that's possible.
Kind of like the ginkgo tree where we avoid the female trees.
Exactly. But with buffalo grass, if we're working with vegetatively propagated materials like we do with the hybrid Bermudas, we can only choose to work with improved female plants and propagate them up to field level. And then there's no problem.
Cool. So that's not as bad as the POA. You got a way around it. I know POA in the Northeast is a terrible allergen.
Well, something else interesting about it, and this has to do with those nasty male plants, there are selections, there are individuals in a large population of males that will have red anthers and red stamens and have red, flower stalks. There are individuals that have white and individuals that have blue. And, it's just a matter of time until someone gets the idea to plant these in an American flag motif on a field and have the red, white, and blue in buffalo grass.
Cool. There you go. So what do you think would be the future of buffalo grass, Dan?
The future of buffalo grass is, and in fact maybe the future is here in some cases, University of Nebraska has been the leader in breeding improved buffalo grasses, and they've made great strides in improving quality and density and color, and they've probably got, I suppose, half a dozen different varieties now in the market. The future, though, has to do with water use, increasing populations, especially in arid regions of the country. Kentucky bluegrass and tall fescue probably are not going to be the grasses of choice in the future. Buffalo grass is certainly going to, I would think, replace a lot of the home lawn in some of those situations, just because you can save up to 50% of your water.
Did you see any foreseeable problem from the use of effluent on buffalo grass?
It's possible. Buffalo grass is not terribly salt tolerant, unlike some of the warm seasons are very salt tolerant. Buffalo grass is not.
Yeah.
The other problem with effluent is that when you contract for it, you're usually required to take a set amount regularly, on a daily or weekly basis. You've got this much to irrigate. Buffalo grass doesn't like to be kept wet, and if you're accepting so much effluent that you've got to dispose of it to keep your soils wet, that's not going to be a good condition for buffalo grass. It likes to be dry.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Dan. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully the students will learn a little bit more about buffalo grass.
The Grass of the Week music is the Sand Hills Community College Jazz Band, directed by Tim Haley.